Good afternoon and welcome. Buenas tardes y bienvenidos. I'm John Fanistel, part of the leadership team at VIA International. And on behalf of the rest of the group, we welcome you to the VIA Cafe. This is a special edition, Thursday, 12 noon special edition, in which we'll be learning about the past, present, and future of Chicano Park. So welcome, thanks so much for being here. And it's my pleasure to introduce our guests for today. Just a reminder, we'll be continuing next week, Tuesday, 12 noon for our regular series, Las Noticias from the Border, the news desde la frontera. But today, it's all about Chicano Park, and you'll hear more about the long-term relationship between VIA International and Chicano Park, especially as our first guest will be Rigoberto Reyes, the Senior Program Director at VIA International, and a longtime champion of Chicano Park. Rigo will share his own experience of the park, and then we'll be hearing from Josie Talamantes, who also has a long history, part of the founding leadership of the Chicano Park movement, and deeply involved with the Chicano Park Museum. She'll tell us more about that. And then we'll be hearing from Herbert Siguenza, who is perhaps most familiar from his work in media, arts with Culture Clash, but is now a fellow with the Chicano Park Museum. So a great lineup today. It's my pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague, Rigoberto Reyes, who will get us started with a little bit of a personal history, if you will, of Chicano Park. Rigo, thanks for joining us and welcome.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John. And really thank everybody that's here today. It's actually a pleasure and an honor. I've been following the VIA Cafe not only because I work for VIA, but because I'm interested in the whole issues of the border. I consider myself fronterizo, and that's a subject that we've addressed here in this particular medium for the last few months, as far as how it relates to the border. I actually was born here in San Diego, raised to the age of 7 in Tijuana, and moved to San Isidro at the age of 7 after my parents divorced. And I've been in that particular area all my life. I grew up there in San Isidro, and specifically growing up during the civil rights movement, during the 60s, very specifically. So I was pretty much influenced as far as what was going around my neighborhood at that particular time. The reason I'm stating this is because I remember as a kid overhearing some of the older kids in the neighborhood. These kids were being organized to be Brown Berets, the San Isidro chapter of the Brown Berets. We sort of overheard them talking about coming to a place called Logan Heights to support something that was happening here. We were a lot younger. I was 12 years old and I have no idea where Logan Heights was at. And therefore, I was more curious than anything. And more curious, probably more what we call in the barrio, I was more metiche or nosy, if you will, as far as what was going on in Logan Heights. So anyway, my friend and I jumped on our bikes and decided to come and check it out for ourselves. 2 hours later, we landed here in Logan Heights, and basically to witness to a great extent what was happening here in Logan Heights, which was actually the takeover of Chicano Park. And I'm quite sure that my friend Josie here is going to touch upon that, but I think people need to understand that the takeover of the park lasted 12 days. It wasn't something that just happened overnight. It happened 12 days, and I was here doing one of those 12 days. I don't know what day specifically it was. I'm quite sure it wasn't the first day, but it was somewhere in there, but I was too young to remember the specifics of what day it was. But needless to say, I was mesmerized, and at the same time was pretty well impacted to the point that it helped in my formation of who I am today. Today, like 50 years later, I'm an activist. I've been an activist for the past 45 years, particularly here in Logan Heights in the Chicano community. That's kind of like my entrance, or if you will, my entrance into the relationship that I, for one, not being from this community, but still being impacted. I think it's also important to note that perhaps one of the reasons that I was so impacted is because the same thing that was happening here in Logan Heights is exactly what happened to us in San Isidro, which was the whole essence over eminent domain and people coming over, particularly the establishment coming over and developing those areas without even asking the people that live in those areas if this is what they wanted or needed, meaning the freeways, bridges, and things of that nature. So in our particular case in San Isidro, that's exactly what happened. Our family was moved out of San Isidro to a neighboring neighborhood, regardless whether we wanted it or not. We were just moved. And it's pretty similar to what happened here in Logan Heights and many other underprivileged communities, if you will. So having said that, I just wanted to give sort of like that statement, sort of like a statement on my relationship with Chicano Park. Needless to say, 50 years later, I'm still here. I have been in part of the Chicano Park Steering Committee, which is actually the people that oversee everything that happens in Chicano Park. We're regarded as the stewards of Chicano Park. I'm also a proud member of the Chicano Park Museum and Cultural Center, which Josie, who I'm now going to turn to her, she is the chair of this up and coming organization. So thank you. And Josie, I'll leave it to you because you are the mama of the park.
That's funny. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome, and thank you for joining us today. Thank Via Cafe for putting on these discussions on the border issues. My involvement with Chicano Park began at a very early age, growing up here in Logan Heights. And my family pretty much impacted by the lack of input of policies that were taking place in this area. As my friend Jose Gomez used to say, they just view us in this area as people who haven't gotten out of the way of industry yet. So let me tell you a little bit about Logan Heights prior to the takeover of Chicano Park, just to get an essence of what was here. There were probably about close to 20,000 residents in the area prior to the Interstate 5 traversing from the Mexican border all the way up to the Canadian border. With the decision by the state of California to go directly through this community and use the process of eminent domain to move people out of the area. And that was in the 50s. And so the freeway was completed probably around 63 or somewhere around in there. And then, of course, the impact of the Coronado Bay Bridge on our community. We went from 20,000 residents down to less than 5,000 residents in a matter of less than 14 years. And, you know, it was pretty devastating to watch your neighbors move and be basically kicked out of their homes and not really given, you know, fair market value for their homes so that they could uproot and start anew somewhere else. And I think the last thing to state about this community is that for many, many years, it was a red line district and it was a segregated community, and segregated in the sense through what they call restrictive residential covenants, which means we couldn't really live anywhere else. So, you know, if you were in San Diego, this is where you know, African Americans, Asians, Chicanos were relegated to live. So, you know, and that's why I think the essence of the residents of Logan Heights, you know, have gone other places, but Logan Heights was our home, was our community. And historically, it is the outside of Old Town San Diego, it was the first, I guess you could call, suburb of San Diego. And then, of course, with the invention of the automobile and, you know, they began building other areas. So this was our community. When the interstate came in and when the Coronado Bay Bridge, there was negotiations by many of the business owners and residents in this community to try to obtain green space, a park, if you will. And in those negotiations, it was the understanding that there would be a park built. We hadn't necessarily identified this area, but we had talked about different areas to be a park. I mean, you know, would this be the ideal area to be under a bridge where you've got, like Laura Rodriguez would say, bird droppings and the noise and the soot from the freeway and the soot from the Coronado Bay Bridge on us? But it's what took place when one of the community members was walking through the neighborhood in 1970. He saw that, his name was Mario Solis. He saw that they were tilling the land, leveling it, and he got really excited and thought that they were finally going to build a park in the community, because it was something those of us in the community knew they were going to do, but you know, you didn't have, there was no public input process for us. So we didn't exactly know when or how, or, you know, things of that nature. So when he asked the guys working on the land if they were finally going to build a park, their response was, "Oh, no, this is going to be the parking lot. This is going to be the parking lot for the California Highway Patrol Station." And he was like in shock. And so he basically went through much of the community, talking to the business owners that were around at the time, letting them know that they weren't going to build a park for us, and that they were bringing in the California Highway Patrol Station. And as Yolanda, artist who was in this community, artist Yolanda Lopez states, you know, we didn't need any more police presence in our community. And so we were not in agreement. And Mario then at that point basically goes up to City College and to talk to the Chicano Studies class run by Professor Gil Robledo at the time. And those of us that were in the class, many returning Vietnam veterans, many residents from Logan Heights were in these classes. We just got up and, you know, decided we were going to go down to the park. And at that time, Mr. Robledo said, "Okay, then that's basically your assignment." Really, he had no control over the class, so which was funny. We were just kind of all getting up and walking out. And he says, hey, this is still a class. If you're going down there, you're going to study the situation and come back with a discussion. Anyway, we came down to the park and many, I don't know, the word got out. We basically began to occupy the land, circling the bulldozers, stopping them from work. And pretty soon people started coming from all over, a lot of the surrounding high schools, junior high schools, community colleges, San Diego State, a lot of Mesa, Southwestern, people just started coming from all over to support us. And at that point, another community member from Otay Mesa, the Cacho, Delia Cacho, brought in a tractor because they were taking the bulldozer now out, and brought in a tractor that could be used to work the land. And then people started, you know, bringing plants and, you know, magueys and aloe veras to plant, to create our own park. And that evening at Jose Gomez's mother's house, we formulated the Chicano Park Steering Committee. The steering committee are the stewards of Chicano Park. They have maintained, watched over, negotiated for anything and everything that the park has. That is inclusive of the kiosco, of access to the bay in what they call now Cesar Chavez Park, but we worked on that one for 17 years. That would have been, in our opinion, and still is, Chicano Park on the bay, because we were fighting for access to the bay. But for 12 days, we occupied the land. And the night of the creation of Chicano Park Steering Committee, we identified key players to be the negotiators because we knew we were going to get into negotiations since we were occupying the land and changing the direction of land use at that time. Our main negotiators were Angie Avila, David Rico, and Rico Bueno. And I'm sure there were, Mike Nava. There were probably a couple of Pat Nava. There were probably more negotiators, but those are the key ones that stay that stay in my memory at this point. As Tommy Camarillo says, Tommy is the chairwoman of the Chicano Park Steering Committee and has been in that position probably about 30 years. We had Jose Gomez and Ron Trujillo and Chunky Sanchez as part of the leadership, but when they've stepped back, basically Tommy stepped in, and she's held that position for the last 30 years, I would say. Excuse me, maybe even a little bit longer. But as she says, we've had to fight for everything and anything in that park. It took us 7 years to negotiate the kiosco, which you could see on the background is about right there. If you can see my finger, that's the kiosco.
Yep, we got it.
Yeah, and technically we had to bring in an architect because it was technically supposed to be designed by the architect, but in reality, I think Jess Haro was a city council person at the time, and we were coming up with our own designs for the kiosco, and he was pretty influential, and he wanted something kind of mission style, and we rejected that. We brought in Alfredo Larin as the architect, but in reality, what Alfredo did was only take the designs that the community had come up with to create the kiosco. I mean, it's really not his design. He's the architect that's listed because he may have done the technicalities, but that was an effort by the community, and in particular, the Chicano Park Steering Committee, to create the design of what we wanted in the center of the park at the time. I think going forward, I mean, I can put it in a nutshell, and I'll reiterate, is that we've had to fight for everything in the park. And the steering committee, Chicano Park Steering Committee, is a collective body. We have open meetings, anybody can attend, and we are a collective environment that, or collective committee that works for the betterment of the community, and specifically for the betterment of the park. So after many, many years of negotiations like I said, we had to negotiate for the bathrooms, for God's sake. I mean, that's a very essential need for the community, but no, it took, I don't know how many years to get the bathrooms in place. The kiosco, the second children's playground, the current children's playground. And even now, I mean, we've negotiated for upgrading the bathrooms, but what they did, they don't listen to us. We told them we want, barriers in front of the bathroom entrance. Well, that was never done. And we're still complaining about it. Whether the grass is green. I mean, you go to Balboa Park and you see beautiful green grass. You come to our park and you see patches of green grass, and most of it dirt. So, it's a labor of love. It was listed on the California Register of Historic Places in 1997. I think in 1980 was the date the San Diego Historical Society recognized the park for its historical significance. 97, the California Register was done by Dr. Jim Fisher. And then in 2013, it was listed on the National Register of Historic Places. And then in 2016, it was recognized as a national landmark. A couple of things have happened since 2013 as we began working on the development of the Chicano Park Museum and Cultural Center. And that organization successfully negotiated a 20-year contract lease agreement for the facility there in the park. And ironically, it is the facility that was targeted to be the California Highway Patrol Station. So the trajectory of that building has a history as well. Initially, it was Caltrans, and then they targeted to be the CHP. And then through the negotiations and the takeover of Chicano Park, it became the home of the Chicano Federation, which is a conglomerate of social services. And then in 1980, 79, 80, they moved out, and it was a political plot against them that the city made them move out. And I'm not going to go into that because that's the history of the Federation. But when they moved out, there were a few of us, Jose Gomez, myself, meeting with Dr. Phil Del Campo from the city at the time to renegotiate the use of the building because the Chicano Federation was in the building. And though the Federation moved out, we still stayed in the building. And we stayed in the building, I think probably about 6 months, but I'd have to confirm that with Tommy Camarillo because she is the archivist and historian that has kept all the records in place. But at the time, I was the director of the Centro Cultural in Balboa Park. And so through the negotiations regarding the building, I mean, we realized we were not in a position, and I'm saying we at the time, Chicano Park Steering Committee, to take over and, you know, maintain the building with all of the expenses. So when Phil started negotiating with us, he wanted us to swap the Centro Cultural out for this building. And I could not do that because I was not speaking on behalf of the Centro. And plus I had a board of directors and everything else. It might have been a good thing to do, but we didn't do it because we felt that the Centro Cultural needed to remain in Balboa Park with all the other cultural centers. We did negotiate the building. We agreed to allow adult and community education, part of the community college system, to occupy to be the residents of that building. And then and we were promised the building back as soon as they built a facility for them. We just didn't know it was going to take over 36 years. And many of us, you know, were passing on, whatever. So when I got word that the community colleges were just about finished building a building, I began working with the powers that be to try to negotiate that building for the Chicano Park Museum and Cultural Center. We incorporated in 2015, and we've been doing programming for the last 4 years. And along the way, we negotiated the building. And in 2018, we secured successfully a 20-year lease for the building. But for the last 2 years, they couldn't actually give us the building because the building had problems. It had asbestos, it had lead, it had, you know, it just was a mess. So we've been working with the city through, at that time, Councilman David Alvarez and now Councilwoman Moreno. And they've used what they call capital improvement funds to redesign, redevelop the building. And where we're at right now is specifically working on the flooring of the building. And I'm not sure how long that's going to take. We're working with the councilwoman and real estate assets right now for two things: trying to get the resources for the flooring of the building and to renegotiate the lease, because we don't want to be responsible for 2 years of lease that we haven't been in the building. So that's basically where we're at right now. What we decided to do last year was there were a couple of grant programs that were available, and we approached Herbert Siguenza to think about being an artist in resident. This was, of course, all before COVID-19 hit, at the Chicano Park Museum and Cultural Center. And so we were successful, and Herbert's been in resident at the San Diego Repertory Theater doing wonderful work. He's a recognized, established artist, and we were successful because the California Arts Council is very critical of support to ensure that most artists that are part of the residency program have to be professional practicing artists, as they say. And so where we're at right now, we're going to host, and Herbert will talk more about it as we go forward. But I mean, that's one avenue. We're negotiating renegotiating the lease. We're completing the floors. We're targeting our first exhibition to be the artist who painted in Chicano Park. We know that we can't do a full exhibition of all of them, so it'll probably be 3 consecutive exhibitions with the artists. So by the end of the 3rd exhibition, all the artists who have painted in Chicano Park will have been part of this consecutive exhibition of Chicano Park artists. And then the last thing I'll bring to your attention, which just occurred in the last day or so, is that a year ago I went to Congress to seek a study to review Chicano Park as an affiliate site of the National Park Service. What that means is we're not part of the federal government, we're not part of the National Park Service, but as an affiliate site, which means the historical significance of the park is at such a level of value and expertise that as an affiliate site, we could seek resources from the National Park Service to upgrade anything in the park, or to show support, or work with the Chicano Park Museum to do programming that centers around the park. And that's a no-brainer for us. And yesterday we received a letter from Congressman Vargas's office, who initially supported this effort, put forward a bill for this study. We received from his office and from the United States Department of the Interior that they will be taking on what they call a reconnaissance survey to determine if we are eligible to be a affiliate site of the National Park Service. And then what that means, like I said, we'll be able to seek resources from the National Park Services, or be available if Congress directs funding to our organization. So it's a win-win for us, and it's a win-win for all involved. And I think I'll leave it there because, like I said, we've been doing programming for the last 4 years, and we're really excited to host Herbert Siguenza to do artists in residence with the support of the California Arts Council and the Chicano Park Museum and Cultural Center. And the project is called Resistance Creates Beauty. So Herbert, I'll turn that over to you. And then at the end of the session, if anybody has questions, I'd be here to answer.
Well, thank you so much. Well, it's a real honor. It's a real honor to be artist in residence at the museum, because as you can see, the museum reflects a really long history that Josie just laid out. And there's a part of me that's nervous as well, because I got to get it right, you know? And you know how Chicanos are. You didn't say it right, you know? But we got to get our history right, and that's right. I think I'm really honored to be part of it, but I think I'm qualified because, as you know, my work with Culture Clash over the years, we, in the 90s, we went all over America, and we, as outsiders, because I'm also an outsider. I'm not from San Diego. I'm from San Francisco, then LA, and now I live in San Diego. But as outsiders, I think you get a good perspective when you go into an objective perspective, unbiased perspective, when you go into communities and start interviewing people. And we did that for many years in the 90s. We wrote many plays. In 1998, we wrote a play called Border Town, where we interviewed people on both sides of the border and came up with one of our most popular plays called Border Town, where we paint a portrait of what was going on in San Diego in the late 90s. And that's basically what I want to do here is recruit community residents, not professional actors, but community residents to go out and interview with me and gather the stories about Logan Heights and the formation and occupation of Chicano Park. And that's why it's called Resistance Creates Beauty, because if it wouldn't have been for the warriors, for the people who occupied the park in 1970, the park would not exist today. So it really takes effort. It takes resistance to create. And many of our cultural institutions around Aztlán were created that way, where people were just had enough and overtook buildings or went to City Hall and demanded their rights. And so I'm really excited. Like I said, I want to recruit people. Why don't you go ahead and put the flyer up and I'll read what it's about.
Sure, glad to do that. Here it comes.
Yeah, the Chicano Park Logan Heights Oral History Project, that's what it is. Resistance Creates Beauty will be a community arts project that will educate and train community residents of San Diego's Barrio Logan neighborhood to interview, write, and perform the oral histories of residents, artists, and activists that were involved in the creation of Chicano Park. The Chicano Park Museum and playwright Herbert Siguenza have been granted an Artists and Communities grant by the California Arts Council. We are looking for community participants. So I'm glad I'm on here right now because if anyone's interested in participating, we really want to hear from you, that want to interview community residents, write and perform these stories. You can contact me. There's my email. And like I said, the Resistance Creates Beauty, it's funded by the California Arts Council project. And
Herbert, we'll distribute your, with your permission, we'll distribute your email contact to our list. And
yes, I'm really looking forward to, I need more participants because I really want this to be a community project that is created by the community, for the community. And hopefully by next year when we can actually get out there and perform it live, you know. So we're, you know, I'm ready to perform it live or I'm ready to perform it virtually. Well, in any case, we are going to document this history, make something artistic out of it, and this will live in the archives, of course, at the Chicano Park Museum, which is part of their agenda is to preserve history. So we're going to have all these interviews that we'll be saving for their archives as well. So it's, you know, what can I say? I'm very, very excited about it. I'm very honored to be part of it because like I said, I'm not part of the community. All these warriors have been at it for a long, long time. And so I got to get it right, you know? But I have immense respect for San Diego and Barrio Logan. It's always been a cultural hub for me. It's always been a mecca for me in Culture Clash. We've always come back for Chicano Park Day, and we've always seen it as the mecca in Aztlán. You know, we've always seen if Aztlán's going to have a capital, I think San Diego and Barrio Logan would be the capital. So I've always seen it as the Chicano community here has always been to me authentic, honest, and I've always had a great affinity for it, a great love for it. So hopefully they'll adopt me and I become a resident soon.
Hey, I would just want to add that what Herbert's doing with this residency is a continuation of what we've been doing. If you go to our website, chicanoparkmuseum.org, and look at the website, you can see we've been collecting oral histories for a while. And this is a continuation of one of our board members' work, Alberto Pulido, who's a professor at University of San Diego. And I will
I'll be using, yes, and I'm going to go excavate through those, see what I can excavate and see what I can use for the piece. In fact, this interview that you just did with Josie just 10 minutes ago,
great.
A lot of great information that I didn't know of. And so you know, that's part of the process too. It's just gathering all this data. So the first 6 months is all about gathering data. And then after that, what I do with people is that we read through it. We see what resonates, what are the connections, how can we dramatize this? How can we musicalize this? And so if we create a story that's entertaining, that uses, you know, poetry, music, monologues to tell the history of Logan Heights and the occupation of Chicano Park.
Yeah, that's Herbert and Josie. I'm going to just kick off a little bit of conversation, if I may, with a question of my own. But then I also want to encourage maybe others who are joining us today to join the conversation. We'll take this as an informal opportunity to stir the pot and pick your brains and learn more. Josie, I love your description of you know, the Chicano Park Steering Committee and the whole effort across these years as a labor of love, and then also Herbert, your emphasis of is resistance. You know. And those two things, resistance and love, are two powerful forces. I wonder, you know, well, that's one question. Is just, you know, what's kept you going all these years, Josie? I guess is one question. You know, is it how do those things mix in you, and how do you keep them in balance, or do you let one come to the top at sometimes, and are they always present in your struggle? The two of those. That's my first question. The second one, though, maybe more general, would be I'm interested in, you know, right now we're in a time, at least in some parts of the country, the United States, where people are really revisiting, you know, their history, and especially the public landscape. You know, who shapes the public landscape and tells the history of our peoples, right? Plural peoples. So I'm interested to hear from either of you on that latter question, but maybe let me start with you, Josie. How do resistance and love work together in your mind and heart and spirit? How have you kept it going all these years?
Yeah, no, I'll be quite honest. My family has roots here in Logan Heights since about 1906, and so yes, I was part of the takeover of Chicano Park, and I was part of the development of the Chicano Park Steering Committee, and then in the 80s, I also was part of the renegotiation for the building, and that was critical. But I'll admit, the caretakers of the park have been the Chicano Park Steering Committee, and they're being led by Tommy Camarillo, of course, at this time. But they have been the true caretakers and stewards of the park. My involvement in the takeover of the park changed my life. I'll be the first to say that, because it validated what was going on inside me personally, to be able to stand up and have a voice and to demonstrate my self-determination as a Chican India in this world. Because if you know anything about San Diego and Tijuana and this border region, San Diego has always been very, very conservative. It is a Navy retirement, military town. And so those of us that lived here and our families, again, I'll reiterate what Jose Gomez, we were just viewed as those who hadn't got out of the way of industry yet, because they had already decided that this area was going to be industry. And for me, when I see, when I drive into Seattle and I look at the port of Seattle, and then I look at, all the industries there, I'm sure that was their expectation for this side of the bay. Because if you look at the Coronado side, it's very beautiful. There's a little cove there that, tourists can get in the water. We're bombarded by industry and pollution. And those effects have had negative effect on our community. But I was gone for many years, so I always came back. I was always part of the fight. I was always part of the discussion, but I have to defer to my colleagues in the steering committee as the ones that really have maintained it. And I'll go back to Tommy. I mean, she's been the lead for as long as she has, and organizations fall apart a lot of times, and she's been consistent, and she should be honored more than what she is. She's gained some awards, but I think with her resilience, she has made this place beautiful through her efforts.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Yeah, well, either of you or Herbert, how about this? Are you tracking the larger? We've been talking a little bit on our Tuesday weekly series about the relationship between the Black Lives Matter movement, but I'm now thinking specifically about the movement to, for instance, tear down Confederate monuments,
Yes.
especially in the South of the United States. This kind of project of reclaiming or resurrecting a public history. Do you see your work in that context in some ways?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Culture Clashes plays. I've always examined history, and have always questioned the history books. Right. So our first play was about Father Sarah. We wrote this in 1988, where we talk about how he was trying to be. They were trying to canonize him at that point in the late 80s, and we wrote a play about exposing all the horrific things he did to the Native Americans. And
Yeah.
And he still became a saint, by the way. But no, I think the founders of Chicano Park even knew what they were doing, that what they have created is a monument.
Mhm.
You see the whole park. I see the whole park as a monument to anti-racism, of self-determination, of anti-white supremacy. This is I'm sorry to say it, it's a big FU to the establishment and the conservative values of San Diego, saying we are here, we've been here, we're 5 minutes from the border. There's no difference between our Tijuanenses and the people in Logan Heights. We are here. We've been here before the border. So I think it's a monument to that. It's a monument of survival, of resistance. And I think that's when the best art comes out, in my view. If you look at Picasso's Guernica, right? One of the most amazing pieces of art was out of resistance, was out of reaction that fascists bombed one of his cities in Spain, right? So, it's not pretty. It's not pretty. You see a lot of the art in Barrio Logan is not pretty. It's about pain. The latest mural is about Anastasio. I forget his last name, but
Hernandez Rojas, yeah.
exactly. He, this is a victim, one of many, just one of the many horrific murders on the border. So, this monument is living, it's breathing, and it's very powerful, very powerful. This is our Black Lives moment in as an art piece.
Yeah, I was so pleased to see just a couple of weeks ago they announced, I can't recall, it was one of the major foundations, whether the Kellogg Foundation or the Casey Foundation, a major national foundation dedicating a major project towards monuments in light of this recent turmoil. And they defined monuments more broadly as both the physical monuments, but also the space that is defined by that the monument encompasses, or that encompasses the monument. Very interesting way of talking about, again, public space, historic markers, and how people choose to tell the story, often without words, but tell the story of the history of the place, right?
I mean, it's no coincidence that we had white supremacists and Nazi groups come to Chicano Park, right? That was what, last summer?
It was September of 2017, 18, and then it was February of 2019.
And what were they protesting specifically? That it was what?
They didn't like some images in the mural. They don't like Chicanos, basically.
It was so-called anti-American, right?
Yeah, right.
Anti-American. Well, that's what's so great about art, right? That it affects people that way, right? It really is. And we've always been surrounded by a narrative, a white narrative, a patriotic narrative that doesn't reflect our reality. Just changing those narratives.
Well, I want to be sure we get a chance to open it up. I've got Josie and Herbert on the spotlight, but our friend Rigo Reyes is also here with us, who kicked off our conversation. Are there any questions that anybody in our group here on Zoom would like to lift up for Josie or Herbert or Rigo, or just about the park in general?
Yeah, I was gonna just add in there. I'm sorry, Rigo. Let me just add one thing. Is when I was doing the research to have Chicano Park listed on the National Register of Historic Places, we really couldn't find any examples of a like project. So it was pretty difficult to develop that. And one of the things that I remember looking at was when they recognize, for example, the battlegrounds during the American Civil War and how they do these reenactments of, you know, the South and the North and all this. And I started thinking about Chicano Park at that point and how our community did that's a battleground it's a battleground, and it has to be recognized as a battleground, just like Hazard Park in East LA, where all the students ended up during the blowouts of 1968.
Wow.
Hazard Park is a battle. These are battlegrounds. And if you think about that
Hmm.
in those terms, then you understand preservation. And with regard to the monuments being knocked down,
Yeah.
you know, that's in a sense, I understand the erasing of history, but they should be moved into historical sites,
Uh-huh.
not something that is perpetuating that era of time that validated, you know, slavery and
Yeah.
oppression. They should be moved into historical sites to tell their side of the story, but they should not be out in public like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, Rigo. I
Wow,
didn't-
wow, you Josie, you sparked my mind. You know, a lot of these Gettysburg people and all these people, they do recreations every
Yeah,
year.
they do. They do.
Imagine if we did a recreation of the taking over of Chicano Park. That would
Wow.
be
There you go.
amazing.
There you go. I like
There's
to
my
add.
first act. There's my first act right there.
I'd like to add something to everything that's been said, because for many of us, I think the symbolism as far as Chicano Park is concerned, you know, we talk about resistance, we talk about the love and so forth, but for many of us also, it symbolizes our own identity. Identity is very important in a sense, because yes, although we are at the border, we're still dealing with issues of identity in a sense, because we're from over here and we're rejected over here. We go to Mexico, we're not exactly Mexicans, we're already Pochos. And therefore, this symbolizes, I think, Chicano Park kind of symbolizes who we are, and not only that, but it becomes our sacred space.
It's a sacred
And I think those,
Yes,
those
a specific identity, which is true, Rigo, because, you know, just because you're Mexicano doesn't mean you're down with the Chicano movement, right? I mean, I could see, you know, fresas from Tijuana or Mexico City coming to, you know, they would be scared to be in those. They have the same, you know, the same attitude. I was looking for a site to do a site-specific piece called El Henry a couple of 5 years ago for La Jolla Playhouse and San Diego Rep. You know, it was, you know, I brought down the producers of La Jolla Playhouse. They had never been to Chicano Park, you know. They had never even heard of it, in a sense. I was amazed. I was really amazed how segregated we still are.
Yeah.
You know, we still are.
You know, and going back to the analogy of Gettysburg and all of these other things. So, you know, I was trying to wrap my mind around the historical figures that, you know, I threw out a lot of names today, and those names, many of those people, you know, have passed on. Not all of them, but many of them. I mean, Tommy's still with us, but most of the other people have moved on and transitioned. And when you look at those sacred sites from the American perspective with regard to preservation, those individuals are kind of canonized, if you will, you know, not necessarily in any religion, and they're recreated. And when I was working on the document to recognize Chicano Park, I had to keep thinking in my mind of all of our warriors who we've lost and need to be recognized as part of the resistance of this community to define for themselves who they were and who they still are. And yeah, I would agree with Rigo. You know, I've got familia in Tijuana, and you know, I'd go to Tijuana and I was still a pocha. I didn't fit. And I come over here at the time, and you know, Navy retirement. That you know, it's just been in a transition in my own mind of the takeover of Chicano Park really set me straight. You know, I didn't have to lean towards the model of assimilation or acculturation. I could be me, and I could serve my community wherever I was at. So I still see Chicano Park as that level of indoctrination, if you will, or belief in ourselves as a community.
Yeah.
A safe space for Chicanos.
Thank you for that. Yeah. Let me just see if there are other questions. Anybody want to lift up a question from our group here on Zoom?
And I will say I have other board members that are on this Zoom. I saw Elena, I saw Jesse Constancio, I saw Lucas, and I didn't look through others, but there are other board members of the Chicano Park Museum and Cultural Center. And again, just a plug for the museum. Anyone that donates to the museum before we're actually in the building, we're keeping track, and you're referred to as Los Primeros. So if you make a donation on our website, just indicate Los Primeros so your name gets included, and we will acknowledge you once the building is open.
Hey, John, there's a question on chat by
Yeah.
Hadley.
Yeah.
Does the Catholic faith of many Chicanos agree with Siguenza that Junipero Serra was a curse to the indigenous people? It seems that the reality is much more complicated.
Well, let's open up a can of worms here.
Yeah, I know. It's interesting.
You know, I will share that my experience, I hadn't ever done this before, but I went over and took a tour a couple of years ago of the original San Diego mission, not the Old Town one, but the original.
Right.
And I was astonished at how, I mean, I guess the technical term is hagiographic, right? It's worshipful of Junipero Serra, that experience was. And I was reminded that, you know, we can say it was a complicated history, but boy, if you go to the missions, you don't get a complicated history. You get Spanish colonization and the romanticization and the worship of Junipero Serra. And you get over off on the corner, one tiny little mention of the native peoples who were so blessed to become a part of the mission. I mean, this is 2017 in San Diego. And I think of all the fourth graders in California, you know, California public schools, they're getting toured these missions, and they're getting told one very, very, very specific history.
But if you dig deeper, San Diego Mission was the first one to resist. The Kumeyaay were the first ones to resist and actually, you know, riot against the priests.
And that again,
I think they burnt down the first actual mission was burnt down by the Kumeyaay. So that's the resistance. I think it's in the water here in San Diego that we have resistance.
Yeah, because we don't have much water.
I went back to school late in my days to get to do studies in history, and the historians say history is always complicated. That's just a given. History is always complicated, but the question is who tells the history, right? And whose perspective gets elevated, whose perspective gets excluded, whose perspective simply gets forgotten oftentimes, only then has to be reclaimed. So I don't think it's as easy as Junipero Serra was an evil man or Junipero Serra was a saint. It was a complicated history, but unfortunately, for the most part, only one side of that history gets told. But anyway, that's my take on that question, that can of worms question. What else is there? I see some thank yous from people. Thank you very much for joining us, everybody. So appreciate your joining us. Any last minute questions before we close?
Yeah, this is Elisa again with VIA. I just want to say here that we are so at VIA International honored to work with Chicano Park. And as our mission is oriented around leadership, and we just see the work that's been done as exemplary and unique in this world. And we trust will be support to you for introducing many more people and particularly youth to this work. And it's just such a clear example of resilience. And I think at this time, with what's going on nationally and particularly kind of in concert with Black Lives Matter, these are the expressions of community that, we need to hold up. So I just want to appreciate your participation here, and also however we can support this initiative with whatever's created here with your efforts, Herbert. We'll be very happy to
Thank you.
to hold that up.
And,
Thank you
and
so much for getting the word out. Again, if you live in Logan Heights and want to talk to me, email me. If you know people that want to get interviewed, email me. Or if you want to participate, email me. Thank you.
yeah, I would say, Elisa and John, it's been an honor to partner with VIA when the museum was first starting up. And even though we had our 501c3, we really didn't have a history and we relied on you extensively. So that's with regard to the museum. And then just a clarification, the Chicano Park Museum and Cultural Center is one entity and the Chicano Park Steering Committee is another entity. In the building, it will be the Chicano Park Museum and Cultural Center. However, there will be office space for the Chicano Park Steering Committee because when we were negotiating the building in 79-80, I was representing the steering committee at that time. So when I went forward to the city, I let them know that when we negotiated the lease contract, they were real adamant that we couldn't bring in other organizations or charge them rent or anything like that. And so I was adamant about putting forward that the Chicano Park Steering Committee would have office space in our building. And of course, they will not be paying rent. They will be part of our efforts of serving the community.
As they should.
Absolutely. Well, very good. Well, listen, I'm going to close out our spotlights here as I say thank you to Herbert Siguenza, to Josie Talamantes, and to Rigoberto Reyes. And then I'm going to ask us all to just give a big round of applause, un fuerte aplauso, as we thank these three leaders for their sharing with us today about the past, present, and future of Chicano Park. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next time, next Tuesday, Las Noticias from the Border, with our guest, Stephen Farnsworth, to talk about communication and character in presidential politics. So we'll see you then. Thanks everybody for being here.
Thanks, John.
Gracias. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Herbert. Thank you, Rigo.
Thank you.